Good evening from the 95.5 WBRU studios here in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm Jay Postal, and I welcome you to 95.5 WBRU 360's Forum for Rhode Island's General Treasurer Candidates. Election Day is November 4th, and we're asking the questions that you, our listeners, want answers to. I would like to thank our esteemed candidates, Ernie, Almonte, and Seth Magaziner, for being here with us this evening. Emily Wooldridge and Will Adams from WBRU News are here with us this evening to ask the questions. Candidates will have 90 seconds to answer each question and 1 minute to offer a rebuttal. They will be notified when they have 20 seconds remaining and will be given a wrap-up sign when 5 seconds are left. At the conclusion of the debate, each candidate will have 60 seconds to give a closing statement. Arguably, the biggest challenge facing the Treasurer's office right now is the state's pension system. So that's where we'll start the conversation. Here's Will Adams with the first question.
Thanks, Jay. Thank you all for being here. State is currently in the midst of ongoing negotiations with its employees over the recent overhaul of the pension system. What are your thoughts on the overhaul, and how do you plan to keep the state pension fund stable and thriving moving forward?
Each of you has 90 seconds to respond. The order has been determined. Mr. Almonte, you'll go first.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I was outspoken on the pension problems almost 17 years ago. As the Auditor General, I told everyone that if you didn't fix it right away, it would take draconian measures. This was a problem that took place over several years, and our political leaders failed to do what they were supposed to do and solve the pension problem. You know, employees paid into the pension plan. They did everything they were supposed to do, but our political leaders did not. So I'm glad that we finally have a solution. And I know what happens now that it's in the court. It actually saved approximately $4 billion. And what I would do as treasurer is immediately sit down to try to resolve that case by trying to negotiate with the parties to this case. And the reason why I would do that is with over 35 years of financial experience, I know how all businesses negotiate while the case is going on. It reduces costs, litigation costs, and it reduces uncertainty. But to improve the pension, I would improve returns, reduce expenses, diversify the investments. I will make that plan sustainable.
Mr. Magaziner.
Thank you, and thank you for having us. My name is Seth Magaziner. I'm the Democratic candidate for General Treasurer. The story of the Rhode Island state pension system is really a tragedy. Here you have thousands of Rhode Islanders who have spent their lives serving our community, keeping our streets safe, teaching our children, caring for the sick and the elderly. They held up their end of the bargain. They kept making payments into that pension system with the understanding that a secure retirement would be waiting for them when they were ready to retire. But the politicians in the State House mismanaged that system over the course of many years. And it got to the point in 2011 where we were one of the worst funded pension systems of any state in the country. And it's a real shame. Some changes had to be made. A reform did have to happen. My priority as treasurer is going to be to make sure that we never have to go through anything like this again. From here on out, let's make sure that system is managed well. Let's make sure that we have a treasurer who isn't afraid to speak out and blow the whistle when the politicians at the State House are going back to the same old tricks and the same mismanagement that got us into this mess. And let's also make sure that we manage that pension system in a transparent and open way so that people know exactly what's going on. My background is as an investment professional. Prior to running for treasurer, I was a vice president at a $1 billion investment firm that managed retirement funds and had a very good track record at it. I want to make sure that from here on out, we get a strong return on our investment and manage that system responsibly. We owe it to the folks in the system.
You now each have 1 minute to respond to each other's comments. Mr. Almonte.
Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, that as the Auditor General, I was outspoken for all 15 years of my career about this problem. But as my opponent already mentioned, he talks about transparency, and I already have an issue with that because even with his campaign filing reports, he fails to state where he got $550,000 that he contributed to his campaign. And if you're not going to be transparent about that, how can we expect them to be transparent when it comes to the pensions? When you look at me as the Auditor General, all 15 years, I made all our reports public. I brought it to the public's attention. My feeling was put light on the subject, light will create heat, and heat will cause action, positive action. So as far as I'm concerned, we should find out if we're going to be transparent, let's be transparent about where you got the $550,000 from.
Well, listen, I don't think that making personal attacks and negative campaigning is going to solve our problems. Transparency in government is something I'm passionate about. I was on the board of an organization called Common Cause of Rhode Island, which fights for better ethics and transparency in government. I look forward to taking that experience to the Treasurer's office to manage the pension system in a open and transparent way. And when it comes to my campaign finances, I've been very transparent. We filed every single one of our campaign filings on time. Every one of our filings is accurate. I also released my personal tax returns, which I was not required to do, but I did it anyway. We have been completely transparent in our campaign, and I will be in the state's finances as well.
Thank you, Mr. Magaziner. We now go to Emily Wooldridge.
And so there's recently been talk in the press about state investments in hedge funds. Some have proposed the idea of taking state money out of these funds. What are your thoughts on these issues? And please explain your reasoning.
Well, there are several aspects of hedge funds that I find very troubling. One is lack of transparency. One of the issues that we've had with hedge funds is that a number of the contracts that we've signed with these funds in the past, there have been requirements in them that very basic information be withheld from the public. As treasurer, I will absolutely end that practice. From now on, as treasurer, when I'm treasurer, we will not sign any contract with any fund manager that does not provide an acceptable level of transparency. I also am very troubled by the fees that these hedge funds charge. I saw something a few months ago. There was a report that came out that last year the 4 wealthiest hedge fund managers in the country made more money than all of the nation's kindergarten teachers combined. This is not just a problem with the state's finances. This is really a moral issue that is facing our country. So when I'm treasurer, I'm going to go in there. I'm going to review each of the state's investments one by one. The ones that are not performing, I'm going to do a search for alternatives. At the same time, as I said earlier, I will not sign a single contract that does not offer an acceptable level of transparency, and I'm going to be tougher negotiating these fees down than what we've been doing in the past. I've floated a number of ideas for how I intend to do that, but at the end of the day, this is the people's money. We have a right to know how it's being invested, and we need to make sure that we're doing it in an affordable way, in a way that will produce good investment returns.
Thank you. That was Mr. Magaziner. Mr. Almonte, take it away.
Thank you. On the very first day, I will review every single contract in the Treasurer's office and look at ways to reduce cost and improve returns. When you look at hedge funds, high in cost, not transparent, hard to market. There's a secondary market, but they're hard to sell once you're involved in them. I will immediately, on the first day, go through every single contract, and I will make all the obligations that are public to the citizens. I did that as the Auditor General. All our reports were public. I will make everything public in the Treasurer's office. And if the hedge fund people don't want to make these things public, then we're going to go somewhere else. But I will substantially reduce the investment in pension and hedge funds the first day I go in, keeping in mind that sometimes there's a high penalty to get out. I'll make sure I use prudence to look at that and see whether it's financially feasible to get out, even if you're paying the penalty. But I just want to go back one more time because you mentioned transparency again. If you're going to be transparent, you should say where the money comes from that you invested. Because when you work as a teacher, making between you put $50,000 and $100,000, I don't know how somebody can accumulate $500,000. I earned every penny I ever made in my life. Everything is on that report. I'm a CPA. I don't understand how you can say you're going to be transparent, but you're still not transparent on where the money came from.
Now each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. Mr. Magaziner.
Well, I find it disappointing that Ernie keeps changing the subject away from the questions that you asked, but if he wants to talk about campaign issues, I'll talk about campaign issues. Look, Ernie and I both have put some of our own personal money into our campaigns. Unfortunately, money in politics is something that is a reality these days, and it's a big problem. I'm a big proponent of campaign finance reform. But in the meantime, you have to be able to fund a good campaign in order to win. I'm also proud of the fact that we've raised money from over 1,000 people, mostly Rhode Islanders, mostly in amounts of $100 or less. But let's focus on the issues that the people of Rhode Island care about, which is what are we going to do for them. As treasurer, I will use my experience as an investment professional to get a better return on our state's investments, to improve transparency, and to lower fees. I've outlined specific ideas for how to do this. This is not just a soundbite or a talking point for me. This is something that I have put out specific proposals for how I will do. I'm committed to going to work for the people of Rhode Island, and I'm excited to do it.
Thank you for your responses. Will Adams has the next question following
I get to respond.
Mr. Almonte's response.
Okay, well, let's talk about public matching funds. I actually applied for and qualified for public matching funds, and because I do believe there's too much money spent on politics, and nobody should buy your vote. To me, that was set up so that it limits the amount of money that's being spent, and it allows third-party candidates like myself, an independent candidate, beholden to no one but the citizens of the state of Rhode Island, to run for office and do this job, to take my 35 years of financial experience to improve this state, by improving the pension plan, by setting up a financial expert resource team, by putting a chief accountability officer in to hold our government officials accountable, and by setting up a financial literacy program for the state of Rhode Island. That vision for Rhode Island will improve the state of Rhode Island and set the foundation for the future, for job growth and business creation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Almonte. We're going to move on to Mr. Will Adams with the next question.
Great, thanks. So now, if you could zero in on two specific investments that you would make as treasurer that you see as being key for revitalizing the Rhode Island economy.
Yeah, well, one of the...
Hang on one sec. Mr. Almonte, it's your turn to start.
Sorry.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, the first thing that I would do is to understand that the pension fund is critical to the citizens of the state of Rhode Island, critical to the workers. They planned on this money, they paid into it, their life revolves around this in their retirement. So the first role is to maximize returns. And that's the thing, this is not a place for social policy, this is a place to maximize returns so they can guarantee that they will get their pension in their retirement. They deserve it, and I'll be able to do that. And I will do that by diversifying the investments, reducing the fees. And the way you diversify the investments, for example, I would say you diversify in many ways, whether it be in stocks, large cap, medium cap, and small cap, whether you're invested in international stocks or domestic stocks, whether you're investing in bonds, whether they're local bonds, national bonds, or international bonds. That's how you diversify your investments, whether you look at index funds and you look at alternative investments. All of those ways are the ways that I would handle the investments at the Treasurer's Office. But that's only one part of the Treasurer's Office.
Thank you, Mr. Almonte. Mr. Magazziner.
Well, again, I'm the candidate in this race who has professional experience as an investment professional. I've worked full-time at an investment firm that managed over $1 billion. We had an excellent track record. I'm proud to have been a part of producing a good track record at Trillium Asset Management, the firm that I was at, where I was a vice president. When I look at our state's pension system today, we are not making the same kind of returns that most other large public pension systems in this country are, and that is a problem. So I do intend to go in, do a full review of every one of our state's investment positions. If they aren't performing, then we will replace them. You need to stay diversified. You need to keep an eye on lowering fees, because every dollar that we save on fees is $1 less that goes out to the Wall Street fund managers and $1 that stays here in Rhode Island where it belongs. One of the specific ideas also that I've proposed is taking a very small part of the state's $8 billion pension system and investing it here locally in promising startup companies and small businesses that will employ people. You can do this. Other large pension systems like New York, Michigan, California are doing it. You can do that while staying diversified and maximizing your returns, but also help get the state's economy moving again and put Rhode Islanders back to work. We have one of the highest unemployment rates in the country. We have the highest poverty rate in New England. People are really hurting, and if there's something that can be done from the Treasurer's office to help get the state's economy back on track, I'm going to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Magazziner. You'll have 1 minute to respond. Mr. Almonte.
Okay, well, let's just address the VC piece that he just said. You know, to me, what happens already is about 95% of venture capital investments don't reach the rate of return that is expected, and only about 5% make a significant return on their money. What he's suggesting is you shrink the geographic area where you're going to invest. And any prudent investor knows that when you shrink the geographic area, you increase risk. And now that 5% will become even smaller, that you'd make significant returns. But, you know, I find it interesting because the blueprint that he put out originally says Rhode Island companies. And now in his talking points, as we've been going through different debates, he starts talking about Southeast Massachusetts or Southern New England, not just Rhode Island. And so maybe like me with 35 years experience that's seen things throughout my life in finances, maybe talk to someone who has more experience to tell them that you should look much wider than the state of Rhode Island. There's not $15 million worth of deals in Rhode Island.
Well, I absolutely disagree with that. First of all, let's get one thing clear. Between the two of us, I am the only one who has any professional investment experience. I have worked in firms that in a firm that has produced strong investment returns. I know how to do it. Second, the amount of money that I'm talking about investing locally represents less than 0.25% of the entire pension system. Less than 0.25%. We can still stay geographically diversified nationally and internationally while still investing a little bit more here at home. I absolutely reject the notion that there are not worthy businesses here in Rhode Island that are worthy of investment. We have a very promising startup scene here in Providence. Great companies, Swipely, Andera, Nabsys, companies that are growing, that are doing well, that are attracting capital from out of state. I absolutely believe that we can invest here locally, help create jobs, maintain the strong performance and diversification in the pension system. Again, this is not theoretical for me. I have professional experience as an investor. My opponent does not.
Thank you. Emily Wooldridge will move forward with the next question.
Thank you. So in your statements, you've both alluded to having very different employment backgrounds. And could you talk a little bit about the work you've done in the past and how that sets you apart from the other candidate?
Yeah, absolutely. Am I first this time? Yeah,
Yep.
Absolutely. So prior to running for treasurer, I've been living in Providence, but I've been working in Boston at a firm called Trillium Asset Management, where I was a vice president. I was a member of the investment committee that oversaw strategy for the entire $1 billion+ that the firm managed. And I also had personal oversight for about $100 million of the firm's investment positions. We had very strong performance when I was there. We beat the market significantly last year in 2013, my last full year at the firm. When I was there, I oversaw the firm's investments in the banking industry, the energy industry, the diversified financials industry. And I'm very proud of the work that we did. It was also a socially responsible investment firm. We were able to outperform the market, investing in companies that had strong track records in the areas of environmental policy and labor rights and corporate governance. We were able to do that for our clients. I think that the biggest distinction between us is that I have full-time professional investment experience, and my opponent does not. Listen, I'm the younger one in the race. I don't have as long a resume, of course, because I am younger than my opponent, but I do believe that my experience sets me apart. My experience is exactly what you want to have in a treasurer. Who better to have as treasurer than someone who has professional investment experience, a record of success, and has also been involved with organizations like Common Cause, fighting for ethics and transparency in government.
Thank you, Mr. Almonte. You'll have 90 seconds.
Okay. Well, first of all, my background is I have decades of financial experience. I own my own firm. I was the Auditor General for 15 years. I was the chairman of the Audit Committee of the Department of Defense at the Pentagon. I've been responsible for finances over my whole career. And I find it amazing when I've had to hear this throughout this campaign about he's the investment professional. He spent just a few months as a vice president at Trillium.
That's not true.
Well, how many months was it,
Hang
I
on,
guess?
guys.
Maybe you should tell us how many months it was.
Over
Mine
a
is
You'll
decades.
have the opportunity to respond.
Mine has been 35 years of financial experience, and I'll give you specific examples. At the AICPA, the American Institute of CPAs, I was the chairman of the board, I was the chairman of the finance committee, and oversaw all the investments in the pension plan. So I had the final decision-making ability about where the money was invested. When I was the chairman of the Clean Water Finance Agency, not part of a committee, but the chairman, senior level executive positions, we issued bonds, and when the bonds were released, I priced the bonds, repriced the bonds. I did all the due diligence on it. And when the money was sitting in an account waiting to be used, it was my final call on where the money was invested. I made the final decisions. I wasn't part of a committee. I was the person that executed the decision to get it done. There's a big difference between being part of a committee and having decades of experience and just having 12 months maybe.
Mr. Magaziner.
Well, I was at Trillium for 4 years. I was a vice president for over a year there. I was on the investment committee for longer than that. And I had personal oversight over some of the firm's investments even longer than that. But look, I think that financial experience is important. It's crucial. I also think it's important to know, again, that I've been involved in fighting here in Rhode Island for better ethics and transparency in government and for other causes that I care about. I was on the board of Marriage Equality Rhode Island, fighting for marriage equality here in the state. I have been involved in homelessness issues. Prior to entering the financial arena, I was a public elementary school teacher. I'm proud of all that I bring to the table. I think that we need a treasurer that has a diverse array of experience, but we also need a treasurer who has real ideas for how to use that office to help get the economy back on track. I am proud of the fact that I would say of all the candidates running for down-ballot offices this year, I have put out the most robust series of proposals for how I will use the office that I'm running for to put Rhode Islanders back to work. That is what we desperately need now because we do have so many unemployed.
Mr. Almonte.
Well, I did read his plan, and as I mention all the time, I found it to be interesting but not convincing. It was, am I answering that? Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to ask me a question. But I found it, I found that to be interesting but not convincing. To me, it looks like a term paper that I would have written about 35 years ago. We have to make it clear here. The treasurer's office is the chief financial officer. It's not the chief economic development officer. And what I will do is I'll fulfill the role of treasurer by giving clear, consistent, and competent financial advice to the governor and to the General Assembly. That's how you make business stronger. That's how you make the economy stronger, by fulfilling your role and what your role is. I know the role of the treasurer. Now, I expanded. If you look at my vision, I said that we'd put in a financial literacy program. I said we'd put in a chief accountability office. I said we'd put in a financial expert resource team. All of these things create a foundation for business growth and job creation, and that is the role of the treasurer.
Thank you. Will Adams will have the last question.
All right. Thanks, everyone. So as Mr. Almonte just said, the treasurer does have a unique role in that he or she is entrusted with millions of dollars earned by the taxpayers of Rhode Island. And as treasurer, how would you maintain this trust, and why are you the best candidate for this role?
Well, again, I think the best way to maintain trust is through being transparent. You need to be able to manage the office in a way that is open and that is honest. I fought as a member of Common Cause of Rhode Island for better ethics and transparency in government. But I want to take a minute to go back to something that Ernie just said, because I really think this is turning into the key difference between us. We have a very different definition of what the Office of Treasurer should be. I really believe that the Office of Treasurer can be and must be an engine for economic growth in this state. I think that Ernie takes a narrower view of what the scope of the office should be. The fact of the matter is, our elected leaders need to be what the times demand of us. And we in Rhode Island right now have a crisis with a high unemployment rate. And every person running for every position in this state in this election should have ideas for how they are going to use that position to put people back to work and bring jobs back to our state. I don't care if you're running for governor or treasurer or dog catcher. If you don't have ideas for how you are going to use that office to help get our state's economy going, then get out of the way, because that's what we need. I'm proud of the fact that this is what I'm talking about. And listen, I think Ernie has some good ideas. Unfortunately, a lot of the ideas he's raised are things that are already being done. The current treasurer started a financial literacy program. I think we should expand it, but it's already been done. The current treasurer already is working with cities and towns to help with their finances. Again, I agree with Ernie that that program should be expanded. But I really think that we can be much more ambitious when thinking about what the Treasurer's office can and should be, especially in the arena of economic growth and putting Rhode Islanders back to work.
Mr. Almonte, 90 seconds.
Well, one of the things that I've lived my whole life is through my core values of integrity, reliability, independence, and accountability. I bring trust to the table on day one. Everyone that's worked with me in government, whether it's international, national, or local, you ask them and they'll tell you about my integrity and trust. So I immediately bring trust to the table. With 35 years of financial experience, proven experience that I'm someone that you can trust. And to me, I'm still troubled by the fact that my opponent still talks about expanding this office with unproven plans and an inexperienced person. Through my 35 years of financial experience, I've learned firsthand what happens when people lose their focus on their job. You know, we have a lot of plans. The House had a plan, the Senate had a plan, the governor had a plan, an outside private foundation had an economic development plan. What we lack in our state is we lack leadership. And that's what I can bring to the table. I understand the job, and if you look at everything involved in my vision, everything creates a foundation for economic growth and business creation. Just look at one as an example. The Financial Expert Resource Team for Cities and Towns is miles above what the General Treasurer is doing today. When I was the Auditor General, I got called in when cities and towns had financial crisis on the verge of bankruptcy. And I helped find the problem, create solutions, help them to execute the solutions, bring people together. I will bring that criteria to the Treasurer's office, and we will help the cities and towns to be sustainable so they have a culture of business growth and job creation.
Thank you, Mr. Almonte. We'll have 1 minute for a response.
Leadership is important, and we're at a time as a state right now where we need to decide what kind of leaders we want. Do we want leaders who are going to go into an elected office and really just do the bare minimum of what is required? Or do we want leaders who are going to go into that office asking themselves every single day, what can I do today to help get our state's economy back on track? I've been campaigning for treasurer for over a year now. I have met so many Rhode Islanders who are hurting, who are out of work, who have had family members leave the state because they couldn't find work. Thousands who are working, but they're working for less pay than they used to. I mean, people are really hurting. And for any of us to go into the treasurer's office and say, well, finding ways to get the economy back on track, using this office as an engine for economic growth, that shouldn't be our job. That's not our role. I absolutely reject that. Every person running for any office in Rhode Island today needs to have ideas for how to use that office to put people back to work, because that is what we need as a state.
Mr. Almonte.
I've learned throughout my whole career in finance and being a professional that coming in with the bare minimum sort of sets the stage of the job that you will do. So you talk about someone with no license, no financial credentials, limited experience, an unproven plan, and inexperience, but wants to be in charge of a $9 billion investment. Or you have a choice with someone with 35 years of financial experience. In severe crisis situations, I am the person that they call to come in and solve the problem, find the problem, solve the problem, and bring people together to create success in the future. That's what I bring to the table. I bring high-level credentials, high-level experience, high leadership ability. I've been in charge of multi-million-dollar budgets. I've led teams of senior executives. I was the CEO of senior executive teams. There's no management experience from this person. None. No evidence of it being in charge of a large multi-million-dollar budget. None. And on day one, it'll be on-the-job training. This is no place for on-the-job training. This is not an entry-level position.
Okay, so you each will have 1 minute to give a closing statement. We'll start with Mr. Magaziner.
Well, I want to thank you, WBRU, my old stomping grounds. I used to work here. I want to thank you for having us here today. We really are at a critical place as a state right now. People are hurting, and the old ways will not do. You have a choice in this election. You have a choice between me running as a new face with new ideas, new energy, and a real vision for how to use the Treasurer's office to bring jobs back to Rhode Island and to put people back to work. And I'm proud of the experience that I bring to the table. My experience as a vice president at a high-performing billion-dollar investment firm, my experience organizing for causes that I care about, like transparency in government and marriage equality. I'm proud of what I bring to the table, and I'm excited to get to work for Rhode Islanders. Listen, the old ways are not working. If the choice is between a new face who's going to bring new ideas and new energy to the Treasurer's office versus someone who's been in state government for a long time at a time when our state's finances have struggled, then I think it's a clear choice, and I look forward to asking for all Rhode Islanders' support on November 4th.
Mr. Almonte, take the floor.
All right, well, thank you. Well, as you can tell, this forum has demonstrated a clear difference between the two of us. I'm the only candidate who's qualified to do this job. And what I would suggest for everyone when they're deciding who they pick for treasurer is just think about hiring the chief financial officer for your family, your retirement plan, your business, and you have the two resumes sitting right in front of you. Who would you want? Someone who's inexperienced, limited relevant experience. He says he's a vice president, months as a vice president. 35 years
Again,
of financial
not true.
experience.
Lie.
35 years as a financial professional on high-level positions. And he talks about an insider. He is a second-generation insider. I bring clear, demonstrative management level experience to this. I generally love Rhode Island. I lived here my whole life. I raised my family here, and Rhode Island deserves better. And that's what I'll bring to the table. My education, my experience, my ethics, my maturity, and my love for this state.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of WBRU 360 and WBRU's News Forum for General Treasurer Candidates. Thank you to Ernie Almonte, and thank you to Seth Magaziner for attending this important forum and leading an informative discussion. And thank you to all of our listeners for submitting your questions and making this event happen. Remember, you can check out the complete audio and video from the forum at wbru.com/360 before you vote on November 4th. For more information on voting, you can go to the State Board of Elections website at www.elections.state.ri.us. For WBRU 360 and WBRU News, I'm Jay Postal. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.